Perfection is not when there's no more to add, but no more to take away.
Yeah, I like that.
That's actually the quote I have on my notebook. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, E-X-U-P-E with a little flourish over it, R-Y. And see, what's embarrassing is I took like 4 or 5 years of French.
I can tell.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Jeff Callahan, founder of Become More Compelling, and you're listening to episode 2 of Become More Compelling Radio, my podcast where we deconstruct and look at social skills and charisma experts and try to glean some of their insights, their tactics, their mindsets, and apply them directly to our own social lives so that we can become more compelling. I am excited today because I am joined by Shawn McKibben of SimpleFellow.com. And SimpleFellow.com is a website that is devoted to helping ambitious introverts communicate in an extroverted world. Shawn is a funny guy. He's been featured on Mind Body Green, LifeHack, Tiny Buddha, and Dumb Little Man, Tips for Life. He has 10 plus years experience teaching classes on personal development, aging, and public health. He's bounced around a lot, lived in some different cities, has some good experiences being in new places and still being social. Our conversation today is wide-ranging. We talk about the notion of your authentic self and how you can bring that authentic self out in every conversation. We talk about the power of superhero costumes, which I absolutely love. And we even pull out a little bit of improv activity where we play a improv game that I would invite you to play along with at home, or if you're, in a crowded public area. That would be fantastic. Without further ado, let's dive right in.
Hey Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing well. It is fantastic to have you on the show today. I'm really excited to have you. For people that maybe don't know a whole lot about you, could you give us like a little, like who is Shawn, the about Shawn?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Wow, I'm so excited to go deep.
Yes.
No, yeah, I'm from California, actually. I was born in San Francisco, moved to Colorado when I was pretty young, grew up there, and went to college there. And then after college, moved to Chicago, took an AmeriCorps position and serving underprivileged minorities in the south side of Chicago. And then moved to Portland from there and worked at another job doing career development. And then from there, I moved back to Denver, to the Colorado area, and I worked serving older adults. So I've always kind of helped people in some capacity, those less fortunate. And then after that, I met my wife. We met in college, and then we reconnected. And then came out to California because she got a job editing. She's a video editor. And so then we came out here from there. And we've been here now for the longest we've ever lived in one place.
Which is how long?
3. Since I was in high school, 3.5 years in the same place. So
wow.
I moved around a lot, so it's kind of nice staying in one place for a while.
Yeah, I was drawing a map as you were listing each place, and it's like a connect the dots. There's a lot of places that you've been.
Yeah, I kind of was a gypsy for a while, and moved around a lot, and it's kind of nice to be here. I think we still call Colorado home just because we both grew up there. She grew up in a different part of the state. We both went to the same school, and we were friends for a long time, and then kind of reconnected. So,
oh wow, and we might want to dive into that here in a little bit because I think that's really interesting. But
yes, it is.
Yes, I imagine so.
My wife would say it was very interesting.
So you've lived in a lot of different places. What was that like for you? Kind of bouncing around, and especially socially, like. I mean, you've obviously gone on a self-development journey, and we can definitely talk about that as well. But just kind of the broad strokes, because it can be Good, because you get to basically reinvent yourself with each new city because you're not really carrying any of your previous selves with you,
Mm-hmm.
but yet you're
Yeah, that
carrying
was.
all of them.
Hmm. Yeah, that's what's interesting. My grandmother was the same way. She moved around a lot, went to different places, and she would always tell me these stories of how she was able to, and she would throw these lavish parties, and she would kind of reinvent herself in these new places, and I kind of follow this same pattern. And on the one hand, it's nice because you're sort of forced to put yourself out there, or else you just could stay home, you know, at night and on the weekends by yourself all the time. And then you can kind of test out new personas almost because no one knows you. So you can try out different characters. I mean, you could sort of, yeah, you could be. I mean, I was always myself, I guess, but I could, test out new material because I was constantly trying to meet new people and put myself out there. So I didn't really have a clique or a group that I was a part of. So I would just kind of go out and meet new people in different scenes. But then, there's that quote too. That's I think it was John Kabat-Zinn, the professor at University of Massachusetts, I believe, on mindfulness, and he said, "Wherever you go, there you are." And and that kind of catches up to you too because you can't really escape who you really are. You're always there, even though I was moving around a lot, and so that the essence of who you are kind of doesn't change. And I think by moving around, it's great because you can kind of be someone else in some respects, but I mean you're still there. So I just thought that was a good quote for kind of my experience of moving around.
Yeah, and it's funny. I can't remember what I was reading. It may have even been something on your site where kind of the notion of trying on those different personas, and there's a lot of safety that goes along with that because if you're in a new environment, it might be a new city, it might just be a new venue that you've never been in your own hometown.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, any kind of different environment for sure.
Changing that environment, it gives you that safety. It's almost like I always think of Halloween and how people are dressed up in
Hmm.
crazy costumes, and you can adopt an entirely new persona for a night. And I mean, our true selves, I mean, they're very malleable, they're very flexible. So
Yeah.
it's always you, it's always going to be you. But it's definitely worth asking yourself if you're not getting the results that you want, why wouldn't you adopt and just play and try something new on? Because ourselves are constantly changing.
Yeah. And I think that we always have different roles and personas. And I mean, we act completely different to our family than we would maybe our friends or people at work, or, we do act like different people. And so it's not like we're constantly the same. But then, it does differ and it does change over time as well.
I agree. Let me ask you this: when did you first realize that you wanted to help people, specifically ambitious introverts, with their social skills? What was that process like for you?
It's unusual because I've always been an introvert. A lot of people don't necessarily believe me when I say that I'm an introvert. I like being alone. I prefer quiet environments, and it's I've always kind of wanted to help those less fortunate in some way, or even the underdog at times. I mean, I've always wanted to help people that have a lot to offer, but didn't necessarily get the chance to fulfill that or to become who they want to be. And I feel like I can relate a lot to the struggles of people who were the underdogs, whether that be minorities where I've worked, gender, all kinds of different types of people that I've always been fascinated by. And I think I chose introverts just because I could relate, for one. It's always been deeply a part of who I am. And so I know I've struggled a lot with more of the social skill aspect, and I kind of broke out of that at a younger age. And so it was, it was just difficult. And I don't want people to have some of the same struggles that I had.
I can remember being a freshman in high school, and I actually had a horrible stuttering problem,
Oh, wow.
really severe speech impediment, and
Mm-hmm.
I remember being so anxious on like the first day of school. I mean, I couldn't say my own name.
Oh, my gosh. Wow.
It felt so isolating, and it felt so. It was almost like you were trapped in a prison of your own making,
Mm.
and going on from that moment, going on like a 15-year self development journey. I really started 10 years ago, but going from that to being able to speak in front of people and being comfortable in front of people. I mean, it helps a lot because it really it really makes you feel competent in a lot of different areas of life, be it work, be it just out socially. So yeah, I can definitely relate. Wanting to kind of help people avoid maybe some of the same struggles that I had, and giving them a quicker way to accomplish whatever success means for them.
Yeah, and it does. I think that's really empowering to be able to say, this is what success looks like for me. You don't have to be someone you're not. And I think for a long time, I thought that's what it meant, that I had to act so different from myself, that I had to be like those people I didn't really want to be like. And I learned that I could just be me and bring out that part of me that people wanted to see, and I could sort of choose who that person was.
Yeah, and it's so funny. On my last episode of my podcast, I was talking with Michaela Chung from introvertspring.com, and she has an article that's really
Oh, I've heard of that
fascinating.
site. Yeah.
Yes, but she has a really interesting article on the notion of shoulds and
Mm.
in the different kinds of shoulds that we have in our life. Like, you should buy a house, you should go to college, you should network to meet more people, and a lot of times shoulds come with a lot of baggage of like, this is what's expected of me and this is what I'm supposed to do. And I think it's fascinating when you reframe that and you say, maybe I should reframe should as could, like I could do this or I could do that. And it gets really empowering when you realize that you have those choices when you didn't realize that you had the choices before.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I mean, should and the parts of you that you can't change that you think you should too. I mean, those parts of you that I should be this, I should be better at this, or I should be taller, or should be shorter, or, those things that you can't change as well, and becoming aware of those aspects that, yeah, you can change. I like that, changing should into could.
And I would like to ask you, because I was recently on your site and I read your article revealing your authentic self. And this is a fantastic article.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. I like it because a lot of it really just it's addressing an inner mindset that is I know I had for a long time, and I don't know if you can relate. Like, I would constantly, and I still catch myself doing this, like fabricating, keyword fabricating, conflicts with other people in my head, kind of living out this reality that doesn't exactly exist in the real world. The notion of like the first insight is your reality is yours alone. Just that knowledge of maybe what I'm creating in my head, maybe that's not wholly accurate. And trying to get that distance in space, I think really, really is an empowering concept.
Yeah, because it really feels, it's the hard thing, because it is just your reality, but it feels so real, and like it is the truth. I mean, that that it is so like right or wrong, black and white, that you believe it to be true. And it's fascinating how we can really create our own reality as if it is like the reality. There's no room for interpretation. There's no room for, well, maybe this isn't exactly completely true. And I think that we're so good at telling ourselves these stories, stories that maybe come over time and we've developed maybe as a way to protect ourselves, or a story that has allowed us to convince ourselves to either do something or not do something. And that it just becomes, over time, it's so convincing. I mean, it's like, this is the truth. It's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, like those grooves in a record that just get deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah. Those neural pathways just keep
yes. And
solidifying more and more.
And it becomes more difficult to change over time. It's not impossible, but I'll give you a story. It's actually when my wife and I were just starting to date, and like this is even like pre us actually being together, and in the age of, especially now, in the age of texting, it's really, you have so much ample opportunity for misconstruing a non-response. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I know.
So in my previous relationships, like, if I didn't receive communication back, it was just like, oh no, what have I done? And I'm trying to like Charles Xavier myself into the other person's head and figure out like what's wrong with me from their perspective. And I realized like that's total BS. Like that doesn't work. It's expending mental energy that is just not worth it. So with my wife, my future wife, if I had sent something her way and I was waiting on a response, I would just kind of say to myself like, oh, I'm sure she's busy. I'm sure she would love to get back to me. She's just got some other things going on right now. And like the shift that happened in, I believe, my sub communication. I mean, it obviously worked because we got married, but it's
like it all came to plan.
I'm rubbing my hands together.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. I'm a big believer in like the subconscious and what that sometimes can mean. Like if you just shift a couple of things that you do on the surface level, I think that can impact, and like that echo can impact everything that goes deeper and deeper. And so you're less likely to do things that might mess things up.
Yeah, and becoming aware of that is key. I mean, we get into these loops, these loops of these stories, and when you're aware and you can catch yourself quicker, and like you did with your wife, and when you can say, oh, wait a minute, like that's not really necessarily true. And when you can kind of become aware of it and catch yourself more often, because I think when the more you continue that conversation in your head, the deeper it can go. And when you can catch yourself when you start doing it, yeah, like you said, it can really make a difference.
Yeah, it's going from unconscious incompetence, kind of going through conscious incompetence, and then conscious competence, so that you're doing it right, but you're aware that you're doing it right. And then if you're lucky enough, you get to unconscious competence, where you're doing it right and you don't even realize it.
Yeah, it just becomes what you do.
Yeah, and I actually wrote down on my notes because I was reading this article of yours, and underneath the Charles Xaviering people, because I'm a comic book fan. Like I used to love reading the X-Men back in the 90s.
Oh yeah, I'm going to Comic-Con this week.
Nice. And like in the 90s when they were wearing probably like all plaid and long hair and stuff, X-Men. So Charles Xaviering people and trying to get yourself into their head. It's almost like we're beaming out like neural and emotional Wi-Fi. So people are smart. Like people can pick up on all kinds of subtle things that we're doing.
Yeah.
And I have to stop for a second. Are you dressing up for Comic-Con?
Well, we keep saying we're going to. This is our third year going, and I'm not, because people would blow me out of the water. Like some of the costumes there. I mean, we like wear something, like a shirt or something, but I mean, some of the costumes there are just really well done. And
Yeah,
so
especially I imagine Los Angeles Comic Con. Is that where you guys are going? Are you going
it's
down to
in
San
San
Diego?
Diego, yeah, every year. Down
So
in
it's
Diego.
like the Holy Grail.
Oh yeah, it's pretty overwhelming. You for an introvert like myself, it's a lot of crowds, but I mean, it's like I wrote a post last year about. I'm going to do another one. It's like these. I mean, it's their domain. I mean, these whole. I mean, people that might not have a lot of maybe great social skills or confidence when they come to this, it's like this is their world. It's fascinating.
And it's really fascinating because it almost goes back to the Halloween thing, right? So
Yeah, it's
if
very
they're dressed up
similar.
like the Incredible Hulk or something like that, they're going to embody how that feels,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to get those kind of temporary superpowers. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna put you on the spot for a second. Um, how
Uh-oh.
do you think, like, say someone came to you and they were like, you know what, I went to Comic Con, I dressed up as Wolverine, and I felt amazing. How can I channel that into my everyday life? What might you recommend to them?
Well, I would say that Wolverine is always there. I mean, just because you have a costume on, you're still feeling that confidence. It's not like Wolverine takes over and you become someone else. I mean, that's still you. And I think if you can really notice the feeling and experience you have when you have that costume on and then tap back into that and remember maybe how you were standing or how you were talking or and really notice what that experience was like, then you still can be that person. I mean, just because you're in a costume and covering up maybe your physical part of you, that person is still you.
Mm. That's really awesome because I mean I completely agree, Sean, because it's always there.
Yeah, yeah.
It never truly goes away, and I've noticed, on days where I might not really be feeling social or whatever, if I do some small things and I start to kind of channel that, I notice that it starts to build on itself, and it starts to almost like a rock rolling down a hill.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
builds that momentum, and so if you just do well, for me personally, if I start making eye contact with people, and start specifically making eye contact while I'm talking, which is the most difficult thing to do typically, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and focusing on enunciating and breathing before I talk and things like that. If I do that for a few minutes, then the next time I do it, I feel even more powerful and more powerful. And so it starts to almost be a self-fulfilling prophecy in a good way. And I think there's spectrums there where you can go both ways.
Oh yeah. And I mean, as someone who's in his head a lot myself, it's very easy to build yourself up to that one moment, that one moment where you put on the back to the Hulk costume, that one moment where you have the costume on and then you can be like this person. But there's so many opportunities to, like you said, to build up to those moments. And when you start building yourself up negatively, that one moment becomes the moment. But when you, like you were saying, have many of those smaller moments that are getting you in the right mindset, that one moment doesn't become so daunting and it doesn't become so, like you're working your way up to this top of the mountain. It just sort of happens more naturally.
Right. And I feel like that's much easier than, taking that one moment, like, I'm going to go and talk to this person. Like, if you're at a conference or something like that and you see, like, okay, that person's going to be my first person to talk to at the conference. Good luck. I mean, you can do it, but
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be, why would you put so much pressure on yourself to climb that mountain?
Mm-hmm.
Instead,
Yeah.
start small and talk to the person at the front desk, crack a couple of jokes,
Mm-hmm.
and start talking to people that are just around you, spontaneously, and then you're building up that. Well, I wrote about it on your side actually, conversational muscle memory, where it just becomes easier and easier.
Yeah, it does. And it just, I mean, it sounds like, it sort of sounds counterintuitive almost. Like, why would I want to talk to people that aren't maybe as important as that one person I need to talk to? But it does make a huge difference.
What do you think is the key in those conversations? I mean, I can think of a couple of things, but for instance, like say that you're at that conference, like do you think it's kind of the spontaneity of just immediately going in and doing it, or do you think it's kind of a combination between getting yourself as an introvert kind of in a good headspace before you make that first leap?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think it's important to have that mindset, to prepare yourself and not expect too much from the situation or yourself. Because I think where I struggled sometimes is that I would psych myself up so much, or that I would get so excited or myself into that mindset, that ideal mindset. And then when something would happen, it wouldn't match that level of excitement or anticipation that I had psyched myself up for. And so I think that's important, but you can also get a little too much into your head. I mean, in a good way as well. I mean, I think we're known for sort of talking ourselves down and becoming so much in our heads, but we can do the same on the other end, to where we are, what we expect doesn't necessarily match what is going to happen. And so we kind of get let down in our expectations. And so I think the right mindset is important, and really being realistic about it, and then matching those behaviors and getting in there, like you said, and practicing conversation and matching that level of expectation that we put on ourselves, because we can easily get into, again, back to that story of this is how it's going to be, and I've prepared, I have the right mindset. And then when one thing goes wrong or not as we expected, it can kind of derail the process.
Yeah, and once it derails, I feel like it takes a lot longer to get it back on track.
Yes.
And this all reminds me of, like, I'm gonna tell a story, and I'm gonna try to like keep things anonymous as much as possible, because, well, you'll understand why when the story is over. And I've never shared the story publicly.
Oh my.
So this is, well, we'll see.
This better be good, Jeff.
So I was at a conference a couple of years ago on the East Coast, I'll just say, keeping it very anonymous, just because this is what happens. This is what happens when sometimes what you say is too good. So I was at a conference, and I was just kind of mingling and stuff like that. And we were on a break, and this guy walks up to me. He was wearing a distinctive item of clothing, and I started a conversation with him just by saying, like, "Oh, cool! I've been hoping I could talk to you. I saw you have an awesome shirt on," or whatever it was, and then, like, it must have been so unique to him. Like, his mouth dropped, and like we got into this thing where, like, I connected with him too much, and he was like just like all over me in sort of like a puppy following someone thing for like the rest of the day. And like it was like hitting the hook point way too hard. And I was just blown away. I was like, look, I know I'm good, but holy shit. And yeah, like the moral of the story, I guess, is I don't know, like I would rather that happen than the opposite. It's still, even though it was weird and it was creepy, it was still a lot better than being by myself in the corner, I suppose. So that was like going way far off the deep end.
Yeah, something similar sort of happened to me, and I recognized someone, and I completely botched the name. Like, I was totally convinced, because I was so excited to see them. I had never met this person, but I knew who they were, or I knew who he was. And I approached him, and I called him the wrong name. He just sort of looked uncomfortable, but I was convinced that it was this person. And so he started saying, well, man, kind of nice to meet you. Like, And I was like, "Oh, you still living in Minneapolis, right?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't live there." And I was like, "No, but you do live there, right?" Like, and then I called him by the wrong name again.
Oh man.
And it was just like I was so like confident at that time because I was convinced that this was who he was, and I was totally off.
So, yes, that actually, I'll say one more story because it just reminded me of this, and like something happened to me, like where someone thought I was out at a bar, and someone thought that like I was their sister's ex fiance, and I just kind of went with it just to see what would happen. I was younger then, and I was just kind of like, yeah, let's just see what happens. And like he took me over to his table, introduced me, and then like he was like, man, you really dodged a bullet, and I'm like, I know. It was just hilarious.
That's
Um, so yeah, like if you, it sounds so messed up, but if you like act the part, I mean, people will play right along with you.
Oh yeah, I know.
And I mean, we've already talked about like you're always you, but sometimes it can just be fun to see what's possible when it comes to like interacting with people, and it doesn't have to be stilted. It doesn't have to be like very robotic. It can just like some crazy things can happen when you're out there.
Yeah, and I don't think you have to be worried about doing that either. It's not like you're being fake or being inauthentic. You're just sort of testing out new stuff and just rolling with it. And sometimes it's fun, and sometimes you'll never see these people again. So it's not your whole world isn't resting on some of these conversations.
Yes, with the people that you talk to, your readers and things like that. Is that a recurring theme that you've seen as people that are almost placing too much importance on individual conversations? Maybe they're inside their heads, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of that of really, and this is what gets tricky because a lot of people will say, it's not that I really need to learn social skills per se. It's that I can't convince myself to go out, or I don't feel like what I have to say has much value to it.
Mm.
But I feel like though that's sometimes a way to avoid doing some of the work that does need to be done, because the more you do practice those skills, the less you think about whether what you have to say matters, or because you just do it. I mean, it's just not as complicated. And I think that they go hand in hand, the skill and the ability to, feel like what you have to offer is valuable.
Yeah, I want to make a call out for a second. I love that because it, like that person that says, I need more energy to go out. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's as we all know, there's a difference between what people say and what they actually mean.
Yes, definitely.
Those two things very, very rarely, only in people's most honest moments, do they go hand in hand. And it's not. And the thing is, it's not that people are being dishonest. It's not that people are lying. It's just they're protecting themselves, which is kind of an innate human quality. Who wouldn't want to protect themselves? Except maybe like James Altucher.
Yeah, he just lays it out.
I know you read James Altucher. James Altucher, the author of Choose Yourself. I just read an email from him this morning talking about how like he wrote this piece on why we don't need war anymore, and like his sister stopped speaking with him, his best friend
Oh
stopped
my
speaking with
gosh.
him,
Yeah.
and like it's very, and he's so vulnerable, and that's something that I strive to do in my blog, in my writing, is just lift open the curtain and be like, here I am.
Mm-mm.
But it was so raw and so vulnerable this morning that like I felt a twinge, like, oh, that is so sad. And I mean, he's doing okay, obviously, but you can tell that just by being his like really authentic self, it's attracting people into his life, but it's also repelling sometimes people that are very close to him. And I guess the wisdom there is sometimes it's a bitter pill to swallow, but it's okay. Like you're still going to be you tomorrow, but you're just going to have more of the people that you really want in your life.
Yeah, and you start to realize too that it's not about you all the time. I mean, the less it can be about you in so many different ways. Um, the less it becomes about you, the more you can recognize in those cases where, like James Altucher, it's really not about him. It's about him bringing out those parts of people that they don't like necessarily. And in the same way in conversation, when you can bring out in a good way as well, parts of people that they want to show you, and you're going to be that person that they associate that with.
Yeah,
And
I love that. And it just made me think of like if you've met someone that they think it is about them, not in a like a rambling way, but just you can tell that everything's very centric to who they are. And I think the best conversationalists and the best people with charisma. I'm just thinking of Bill Clinton, for example. I mean, when he meets you, I've never met him. My wife has been in the same room with him, but not me, which I guess that figures.
I was going to make a bad Monica Lewinsky joke, but I'll just refrain.
I like to make jokes by saying that I won't make jokes, and I can say like, I could say this, but I didn't.
Yeah.
But I just did, and that's the true like ninja way to do it.
Yeah.
But from everything I've read with like the reality distortion field that he has, I mean, he's utterly present, and he makes you feel like you're the only person in the room. And I think if we can just bring just a tiny percentage of that to our everyday conversations, I mean, you wrote about it yourself when you included the quote by Stephen Covey: "Seek first to understand, and then seek to be understood," in that order, in one of your blog posts. And I thought that was really key because so much of the time everyone wants to be understood, but first you have to understand the other person.
Yeah, and I think, and that goes back to what I was talking about and managing your own expectations. And when you don't expect yourself to achieve some level of conversation or get something out of it, you don't put that as much pressure on yourself, and you can then focus on the other person too, because you're just not as concerned with you getting everything right and you becoming interesting and you doing all this stuff, when you can kind of beforehand say, okay, well, and I think this is where, as an introvert, you can define that. I mean, you don't have to be someone that's going to work the crowd and, be out for hours exchanging business cards and doing, all these things that you think networking is. I mean, you can be who you want to be for that period of time that you get to define.
Yes, that's awesome. So Shawn, how would you coach someone to have a deeper conversation if they were the type of person who is maybe fed up with small talk, doesn't enjoy small talk very much? How would you guide them to have those like transition to a deeper conversation from small talk?
That's a good question, Jeff, because as maybe all introverts on some level despise small talk, even though it does have a lot of value. And there is that awkward moment sometimes where, you're both nodding your head, or as I like to say, one of my favorites I used to do is take a sip of an empty drink. So it would just be that slurping sound. But I do it many times.
Why are you drinking from a drink that's already been drank?
Yeah.
I don't know what else to do. That's why.
Yeah, exactly. People do all kinds of other things to do that. Yeah, it's tricky because I think everyone wants to have deeper conversations. And I think what really works for me, and what I would tell someone, is really emphasize stories and how you can relate your own story to that conversation. So, for instance, if you're talking about small talk and they mention something in that small talk that you remember you did, or a time when you tried something similar, or anything you picked up on in that conversation, small talk, and how you can relate to that story. And you can also ask them sort of an open-ended question as to how they can relate to something as well, whether it be, telling you more information about it, how you notice, something that they mentioned, and then you want to learn more. You're curious. And I think curiosity and stories are the two big ones to sort of take it from that small talk to the next level.
I definitely agree. There's a method that I teach. It's called the loop method, where L stands for listen. So obviously you're going to need to be actively listening.
Mm-hmm.
The O stands for making an observation about something that they said, and then the OP stands for open-ended question. So just
Yeah, similar.
doing an open-ended question, like at Comic-Con, what was the craziest, I guess, costume that you saw? Was there anything that really blew your mind? Making that open-ended question where you have to say more than a yes or a no. You can say like, oh, there was this really crazy Cyclops costume, and I could say, oh man, Cyclops is my favorite. I wanted to be him when I was a kid. But it would make going to the eye doctor a little more dangerous. I don't know, just made that up.
Yeah.
So just kind of rinsing and repeating that general framework can sometimes I believe, help make you more present in conversations, because I mean, I'm like anyone else. If I'm not careful, I can be inside my head all night instead of in the room.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's in that moment between that transition period can be a moment where you do go back into your head, because I think a small talk is very surface, and you can, point out things in the environment, or, the how do you do, or how's it going? Like those can you can get by. And then that transition moment can really send you back into your head, because, the other person maybe isn't saying anything. And then it's maybe your opportunity to ask a good open-ended question. And I think just acting in that moment and keeps you present as well, and just deciding that, okay, this is the moment I'm going to speak, instead of waiting, for something to happen. Because in that waiting period, that's when you can start thinking and analyzing a lot.
You can take a sip of a drink that's empty.
Yes.
It's good to get full on that air.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think that like those awkward transition moments, especially early in a conversation, it's really like the moment where a lot of our fears start to bubble up, because I think on a very human level, we all have kind of base needs to be accepted. I mean, that's one of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And in that moment, we're like, is he going to throw me out of the tribe? Is this the end? And granted, there's no danger of that, but it's still very real. I mean, it feels that way 100%.
Yeah, it does. And I think back to what we were talking about earlier, and when you do it enough times, or you do it with a variety of people, it doesn't feel as if it's that one, rejection, that big rejection, that you're out of the tribe forever.
Yes.
It's just one other member that you interact with, and you just sort of move on.
And I'll tell you what oddly works well for me, and I haven't really given it much thought until actually this moment in time. The notion of like in that pause moment to actually kind of recenter and breathe. There's a really good you may know of this. It's called box breathing, where you basically breathe in through your nose, 1, 2, hold it, 1, 2, and breathe out through your nose, 1, 2. And it actually a few weeks ago, like it was on like every news outlet. It was weird. It's like I find out about it, and then like everyone else finds out about it. And I'm like, the secret's out. But it's good because it actually triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, which kind of short circuits the fight or flight response. I first learned about it through Commander Mark Devine, who teaches it in his he does like high performance fitness kind of things. So and I've noticed it kind of helps, because I'm not kind of holding my breath waiting for the next moment. I'm actively breathing and experiencing that moment, being present.
Yeah, and it just reminds me of, I mean, that feeling that you need, that flight or fight, or you need to escape. it's not like you're just sort of feeling uncomfortable. Like there's this desire to escape and leave. And anything like that, I like that technique that can bring you back to the present moment and the reality of the present moment too. It's not like you are, that something terrible is going to happen, even though it feels like that way sometimes. And realizing and doing something to really allow yourself to be in that present moment, because it feels like something you need to escape. And then when you can do something to be present, you sort of feel like, oh, okay, now, and then that kind of triggers the mind to say, oh, okay, well, this isn't so bad, and now I can do what I need to do.
Yeah. And I think that, whoa.
Sorry about that.
Was that a bus in your living room?
Yeah, it probably sounds really loud.
Is this Skynet? Is that Skynet?
This is the trash man. It sounds like. It reminds me of that. Have you seen that Louis C.K. episode?
I have not. Is this?
It's hilarious. Where like all these trash men come into his like bedroom and just start throwing trash cans around and banging trash cans while he's in bed.
Oh my gosh. That
probably sounded just like that.
It did. Like I thought, like, are you in a Subway? Or a Subway sandwich shop, something. Yeah. So I felt very present in that moment.
Yes, I'm glad.
Okay, Shawn. So you have an awesome free gift for Become More Compelling readers. It's an ebook that you created, and I'm going to let you explain it a little bit, and then we're going to surprise people by we're actually going to do an exercise from the book, which I'm super pumped about.
Yeah, great. It's called The Introvert's Guide to Engaging Conversation. And I chose the title because it sort of sounds like you're engaging conversation, like the act of it, and also a descriptive word like conversation is engaging. So there's a technique in there called the yes and technique. And I wanted to try and do it with you. And if you could tell me something that you did maybe this morning, and I can respond and kind of give you different examples and we can break it down as to why it works and why it doesn't work.
Yeah, and this is a technique that like improv comics use, right? To
this is
continue a storyline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the yes and technique is used in all improv, and it's a great tool to continue the story, and so you're not rejecting the other person, because it can immediately shut down a scene. And it's very similar to conversation. I mean, it's very easy to shut out a conversation.
Yeah, and as soon as you start using those stop words, I mean, what do you think it's going to do? It's going to stop things. So
yeah, exactly.
Yes. So this morning I jumped on a Skype call with my buddy Shawn to do a podcast.
Well, no, you didn't really jump on. I mean, you kind of called and we talked on Skype, I guess.
Yes, and I actually jumped up and down on my computer is the thing. You probably couldn't see because this is audio only, but I was literally hopping up and down on my computer.
Yeah, so that's so I kind of responded with no, not really, kind of not validating your response.
Yeah.
And then you did a great job of like saying, okay, no, you're validating it again. And yeah, that's exactly what can happen. It's like someone kind of just rejects someone and then someone else tries to kind of up it each time.
In real life, because life is not a game, if you use those stop words like you used with me, then if we're just like out at a bar or we're at a dinner party, like I'm probably just going to shut down. Like it's like, okay, next. And then, it won't be that drastic, but using those yes and words are going to help a lot. So that was an example of maybe what not to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm going to throw something out because I don't feel like I've done anything interesting this morning. I'm going to throw something out to you. So Shawn, and we're going to do yes and, yes and, yes and. What did you do this morning?
This morning I got up early and made a cup of coffee.
Yes, and I actually did the same thing. I like to use Starbucks instant packages like their French roast because A, I like consistency, and B, I hate cleanup. So it does two things for me.
Yeah. Yes, and I love those Starbucks Via packages, I think they're called, where you can just heat up the water, put
Yes.
in the pack, stir it up, and you don't have any cleanup or messy grounds to clean out of the disposal.
Yes, and it's so funny because apparently they're really popular in my neighborhood because the grocery store actually um, a few weeks ago I went to get some and someone had stolen all the instant coffee. Like they opened up the packets and probably just put them in their bag or whatever, and I ended up getting some free coffee out of it because I was like, hey, they're like two that are completely empty, um, because that's really upsetting when you get home and you're like, oh no, I don't have the thing that I want the most, which is my Starbucks via instant coffee.
Yes, and when you wake up first thing in the morning, the last thing you want is to go to the store and have to get more coffee. So when they're going to the store and they're already out of it, it can be very frustrating if you don't have what you need to make the coffee in the morning.
Yes, and do you know there are these little like black cards that come inside those packets, and I've amassed probably I don't know like 50 of them. I'm hoping to just kind of walk into Starbucks one day, plop them all down, and become like the owner of Starbucks.
Yes, and I will become the owner one day. I'm just kidding. No, that was great. You could see how each it's like a back and forth, it's each yes and sort of ups the game a little bit and you don't feel like what you say is shut down. I mean it either reminds you of something else that you can talk about or you can validate what the other person is saying.
Yes, and see, I'm doing it now. Like I can't stop.
And
But
it's not so important that you say yes and every time in conversation because you won't, but it's a good technique to remind yourself to go along with the conversation in the moment.
yeah, and see, I can't not do it now. I agree, Sean, and the reason why is because have you ever encountered that person who is a chronic disagreeer? Because I've written
Oh,
about this
yeah.
and how it
Mm.
makes me want to jump off a tall building with like a fork and hope that it lands in my head or neck region. Um, it's just the most like it's like quicksand, like it's awful.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: is like people listening and they may just be more aware of it. So if they are a chronic disagreeer, they might actually be able to pull out of that a little bit and focus on continuing that conversation instead of halting it. And I mean, I think just that alone is something that could completely change someone's results socially that they're getting because there's so much that I feel like can be blind to us when we just don't realize what we're doing that isn't helping us out.
Yeah. And I heard someone say, I can't remember, but the moment you make someone else wrong, you make you wrong.
Mm.
And it's so true because the moment you say something that is bringing someone down or disagreeing, you're the one saying that. And so you make yourself wrong. I mean, even if it's true, there's just a way to go about it to where you either don't say it at all or you want to learn more. I mean, that's the flip side too. You don't have to agree with everything, but you can ask more questions or become curious about that instead of just becoming that chronic disagreeer and no one likes to be around that. I mean, it just doesn't make anyone feel great.
They're uh, they're not. They're gonna wonder why they're not being invited out on a Friday or a Saturday, and
Mhm.
they'll never know. And who knows? Maybe that's for the best. I don't know. We don't want to hang out with them anyway. If they
Yeah.
if they subscribe to me, hopefully they take this to heart
It's
and
a
then
wake up call.
they
Yeah.
can wake up call. Gosh, there's okay. So I could talk about that for a long time, but I also did want to talk about just really briefly, or however long you want to spend on it. You mentioned that you and your wife, kind of how you guys met, and that you were friends, and we said that we were going to come back to it, and I just remembered it for some reason.
That's good that you did.
Yes, memory recall.
Yeah.
It's important, and I forgot what I was saying. So,
How did
uh,
we how did we meet?
Yeah, so you and your wife, how was that process for you guys? Like, are you both introverted? Do you yin yang? Is she extroverted? Introverted? Like, what was the story there?
Well, we were friends in college. She was in the same school as one of my roommates, and we were friends for a long time, and we kept in touch. And then when we were both back, I think as I mentioned earlier in Colorado, we sort of fell back in touch and hung out a lot, and we talked on the phone. And it was a gradual process, especially because we were close friends, and there's that moment where either one person has to say something, and it can really, derail the friendship, and it could be, it's a very sensitive topic because you don't want to lose the relationship, but you don't want someone else to be hurt either. And so we are both introverted. I mean, we're both very similar, actually. And I know some people have that more of a balance where someone's much more gregarious and outgoing, and it draws out that other person. But we're introverted in the same way, and I think that's what works for us. I mean, we can go out on a karaoke stage, and we love to perform, both of us. I mean, just being silly, and either through acting or singing or just being crazy. We both love comedy. And so we both prefer similar environments, keeping things quiet, lower stimulations. We can be kind of quirky, awkward. I mean, that never really goes away. I mean, I think some people think, at least for me, I don't know about you, Jeff, but it's not like you become this completely different person, when you break out of your shell more, aren't shy. You just accentuate those parts of you that are always there.
Right, that's exactly how I feel, is that those parts are always there. You just don't have that sort of protective shell. In reality, like you just don't need the shell, and you're going to get a lot more awesome things done when that shell's no longer a part of you.
Yeah, and I think people they can sense when someone's being themselves and that shell is gone. And so, yeah, it is a challenge, though, at times. I don't know about your relationship, Jeff, if it's the same situation, but it can be challenging for us to go out sometimes because we can both say we'd prefer to stay in. So there isn't that one person that's sort of like, no, come on, let's talking each other up to go. We can both, it's easy for us to agree on that aspect.
Yeah. And it definitely takes me a little bit to, because, you get your comfort routines down. But like if there's like a social gathering and like, okay, this is something I would be comfortable going to. Sometimes it's good just to just kind of come up with a plan and say like, okay, here's what we're doing tonight. We can do XYZ. We'll only be out this long, and just kind of lay it down and just kind of give that yes or no. Is this something that you'd like to do? Because what can exhaust me personally is I'm hyper aware of decision fatigue, where I just don't like making a million decisions about a certain thing, if it's going out or if it's even like what to do for lunch. And if I can limit those, or if I can just kind of deal with those in my own time, that way I can give that to another person and say like, hey, here's what we're doing. We can go here, do this, do that. Does it sound good? And then if they say yes, that's all they have to do is just say yes and, put on some fancy clothes or whatever it might be, and then go. And I find that that's just, it makes things easier, I feel.
Yeah, and back to the expectations again. When you do that and you don't have to think about decisions or outcomes or possibilities, you don't set yourself up for something that might not happen.
Right. And it's very important, I think, to be okay with that abundance mindset of, okay, well, if it happens, great. But if not, that's also okay. And I'll be fine. And once you do that, like the entire world opens up to you because you've left those expectations at the door. You can still say, oh, it'd be great if this happened. But if it doesn't happen, I know I'm also going to be just fine.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's where you can limit that decision making too, because you're not thinking of every possibility or outcome in that moment. I mean, you can sort of have that abundance mentality overall, but in the moment, sometimes every possibility that could happen starts to flood your mind. And so when you can make the decisions that, okay, I don't have to make the decision, and I also know that it might be this way or it might be that way, but I'm perfectly accepting of what way it does go.
Yeah, I love that because it just makes things easier.
Yes, definitely.
And the title of your website is Simple Fellow, so I feel like simplicity is probably one of your core values, and just keeping things just easy, simple, which I love, because perfection is not when there's no more to add but no more to take away. And
yeah, I like that.
That's actually the quote I have on my notebook. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, E-X-U-P-E with a little flourish over it, R-Y. And see, what's embarrassing is I took like 4 or 5 years of French.
I can tell.
Oh my God. Okay.
I like that quote. That's good.
Yeah. You're a funny guy, Shawn. Like you're cracking me up over here. So,
Okay.
Shawn, if people want to go ahead and check out that ebook that you have, I've actually look for that link in the podcast episode description or at my blog, becomemorecompelling.com/blog, and they can enter their email and they'll get it right hand delivered via electronic hands to their inbox. Does that sound cool?
Oh, that's great, Jeff. Yeah, I think it'll really help you get started just having better conversations. And I think that's so important to just feel like you have something to just start, somewhere to start. And I think this ebook is a great tool for that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of setting the bar on the ground so that you don't have to jump. You can just step over it. And that's usually, if you get those small wins, like self-efficacy starts kicking in, and you start to view yourself as the type of person who can do some of the things that maybe previously they didn't think that they could do. And that's the kind of stuff that really, over an entire lifetime or over like 10 years, I mean, that's going to have a huge impact.
Yeah, it does. And that's, like you said, Simple Fellow is just all about simple ways to live the way you want to live. I mean, just simple techniques and simple mindsets and ways you can just get out of your head and do more. And because that's just what's worked for me and my readers. And the more I talk to people too, the less complicated we make things, the easier it becomes.
Totally counterintuitive. I absolutely love it. So, Shawn, thank you so much for being on the second episode of Become More Compelling Radio, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
Yeah, Jeff, it was a pleasure talking with you, and it's always nice to get to know you a little bit more. And I hope your readers take something out of today's talk, and I really hope we can do it again in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff.